This is Odessa in southern Ukraine. Its streets are lined with cafes, it has a relatively young population, a beautiful Black Sea coastline and a major international port. But more importantly, Ukrainians see it as one of the country's most laid-back cities, with residents who are famous for their sense of humour.
Odessa have an image of a very peaceful and tolerant city in all former Soviet Union, a city of international communication where some kind of fightings between people on national base is absolutely impossible.
But behind this relaxed facade lies a city that has been under attack. And the city's response may have been one of the most important reactions in Ukraine's recent troubled history.
Because of the last developments in the east and in Crimea, Odessa became the Ukrainian city by its consciousness, by its identification.
In Ukraine, Odessa is about as far away as you can get from Russia. But Russia has come to Odessa. The Russian hybrid campaign in Ukraine has targeted Odessa, perhaps because the region is Russian-speaking. But if the hybrid attackers thought that this would help them, they miscalculated.
In Odessa, most people are speaking Russian language, but it doesn't mean that it's a kind of a Russian city, which is, it's like Montreal, it's not a France, and Sydney is not in England, of course.
The Russian language plays a key role in Odessa's battle.
All my colleagues here at the university, for example, speak Russian as well. We teach in Russian. This is my native language.
But this is also a key moment when many Ukrainians are saying that speaking Russian doesn't mean support for Russia.
Many people, many patriots who fight now in the east of Ukraine, they do speak Russian language. We don't feel like Russian Federation and Putin has the right to privatize Russian language because this is the common heritage.
Because most of Odessa's people are Russian-speaking, they've received their news from Russian news channels. And that news has often included disinformation.
I think it's quite a unique phenomenon where you have millions of people year after year on a daily basis tuning in information, TV coverage, news coverage provided by the neighboring state.
Odessa finally reacted and has now cut off the offending channels. And it's having an effect already.
I think it wasn't a good decision to cut those channels off from our air space, basically the TV coverage space, but it was needed because we're already seeing some first results. I mean, some people who were really brainwashed, they now cannot watch those TV stations, and now deliberately or reluctantly they're switching to some local channels or Ukrainian TV channels, and some of those people's attitudes are changing a little bit, shifting a little bit.
When support for Russia, its aims and its activists did not materialize as expected in Odessa, different, more aggressive methods tried to destabilize the city. One of these was a series of bomb explosions designed to sow fear in the local population. Although it has received very little international attention, Odessa has been hit by literally dozens of small bombs. And this place was a victim earlier on in 2015. It's a coordination centre for volunteers who are fighting in the east. As is the usual strategy, the bomb went off late at night. There were no casualties, but the Ukrainian authorities have made sure they fix the damage as quickly as possible from these bombs so that they eliminate the signs of instability that the bombs were supposed to create. The city experienced over 20 bomb attacks, always at night, in the first 6 months of 2015. But they did little to break the resolve of the city's population.
The terroristic acts, for example, they were not successful. They had a very short-term result. So maybe 1-2 days you felt that it is some stress in the society, but then people were forgetting them.
People on the streets of the city confirmed that the bombs hadn't affected the Odessa way of life.
According to the news, they're bombing only some specific targets. They're doing it during the night. So for the tourists, probably not. There's nothing to worry about. But it's definitely the case to look at.
How do you think this has affected the atmosphere within the city? Has it changed people's attitudes and actions?
Don't think so. I don't know why they're doing it, because I think to me it's just pointless. Everybody's smiling, lots of people on the streets, just everything the same.
I try not to worry at all, because all the worries make our life much worse. So I don't worry about this. I think our city is very nice, very touristic, as you see. It's not so nice weather, but anyway we have plenty of people outdoors. So politics is politics, but life is life. So let's stay out of politics.
The hybrid attacks weren't finished though. A series of disinformation and unattributed rumours started to spread. Again, the idea was to generate panic.
When the mobilization campaign was announced, in some of the villages, Bulgarian, Moldovan, Gagauzian, the special people started to develop the panic among the people. That, for one of the examples in one of the villages, when a person came and said that tomorrow all men will be called for mobilization in the village. So the next day, none of the men were in this village because they ran to Moldova.
Soon, the disinformation focused on the danger posed by the pro-Russian enclave in neighbouring Moldova of Transnistria.
From time to time appearing information about the possible attack, rather from the sea, so I mean some Crimean forces coming by the sea, or from Transnistria. And usually people are not analyzing how realistic this threat or not, but for them that is enough.
With Russian troops conducting exercises in Transnistria right next to Odessa, this was a rumour that brought real fear. Behind me is the land that time forgot. It's the region of Transnistria, part of Moldova, that fought a bloody war to break away from that country. This ended in the 90s, and after that time, Transnistria declared itself an independent state. But it's not recognised by most of the world, and it has an unsustainable economy, first of all largely helped by illegal smuggling across this patch here and many other in the border areas, and secondly it depends on handouts from Russia.
We are in between Crimea and Transnistria, so that's a vulnerable region. That's a region open for destabilization, and it seems to be that Russia is using all kinds of tools to destabilize Ukraine, to have this kind of protracted, slow-moving, low-scale destabilization. It seems to be that one of the goals that they're having is exactly that.
Russia is one of the few countries that recognizes Transnistria as a country, and as Russia's aggression in the east continues and its hybrid attacks continue in other parts of Ukraine, it's here on Ukraine's western border that some feel the next attacks could come from. None of these destabilizing efforts worked, but then came a moment which threatened to divide the city like never before. May the 2nd, 2014. On May the 2nd, 2014, the building behind me entered Ukrainian history. There had been clashes between both pro-Ukrainian groups and pro-Russian rebel groups here outside. But as the day ended, many people took refuge in that building and a fire broke out. Over 40 people died. So to give an indication of what happened here on May the 2nd, the building had been taken over some hours beforehand by the pro-Russian rebel groups. They barricaded themselves in. The fire broke out somewhere around the right-hand side and affected the stairs quite intensively. However, the security services, both the police and the fire brigade, were slow to respond. There were attempts by the pro-Ukrainian groups who were still outside to try and help those who were clearly in some distress as the fire raged through the building. But after several hours, it became clear that at least 40 people had become trapped inside and died of smoke inhalation. This time was different. There had been deaths, and not only at the trade union building, but in the streets of the city.
Those clashes that perhaps were planned by somebody, like street clashes with rocks and sticks, turned into a 4-hour street battle where AKM submachine guns were used and Molotov cocktails, as a result of which 6 people were killed.
6 people died downtown, and the first victim is commemorated behind me there. He was a 27-year-old who was killed by a sniper's bullet. May the 2nd left both sides blaming each other. People in the city also had little confidence that the courts would bring rapid justice. So a group of journalists headed by Sergiy Dibrov decided to investigate for themselves what happened on that day.
Finding a single point of view of those events is very difficult now for many reasons. Firstly, nobody expects to hear the truth from the official investigators. The police, the courts, the investigators don't have the confidence of society. That's why a journalist group was set up that has journalists who have diametrically opposing points of view, and we have been working for more than a year together to investigate those events.
The reaction to the deadly events of May the 2nd is possibly the best example of how Odessa fought back against division and intimidation.
As regards the key elements and documents of our work, we signed all of them, all 13 of the journalists with different views. We came to a single conclusion that can be seen on paper.
Despite differing opinions, the journalists have made much more progress than the city's courts. And we've just had a court case adjourned again. This is one of several that has been adjourned so far. And this is why the cases against those charged with causing the deaths on May the 2nd, 2014 is taking so long. It has to work its way through a very laborious court system, and analysts reckon it could be years before anyone is brought to justice. But Odessa knows it needs to ensure that it's never this vulnerable again. And that means tackling corruption and much needed reforms. That is where the region's new governor comes in. Former Georgian president, Mikhail Saakashvili, is a reform specialist, but he can only do so much.
Governors do not have a lot of opportunity because it's not like a governor of state in the United States, or even not a governor like in Russian Federation, because most economical tools are in hands of Kiev government or a mayor or city council. But what governor can do, it's fighting the corruption on regional level.
Making Odessa more resilient through economic reforms is the goal. But the reforms need to tackle first an old system that is full of obstacles.
We don't care to work within the system that doesn't work. What people want to hear is that just like Slovakia jumped 1 year 17% up when they ran the reforms, that's what we want to do. That's our ambition should be.
Odessa still needs reform, including in better infrastructure, improved agriculture, better social protection and less bureaucracy. But what is already clear is that Odessa has managed to avoid the same fate as Crimea.
Crimea was open to anyone. It was possible for any person in the world to come into free Crimea, Ukrainian Crimea, and to have a good time there. What we see today, we see that Crimea is almost blocked. It is isolated. No one can actually go there.
The future of Ukraine is being built in places like Odessa. But it's also true that change needs to be real, because the people of Odessa know the difference between empty words and real action.
If we feel that is at least less corruption in this area, everyone would know that. But if it will be only words, only some declarations, it would be very easy to know.
People are getting impatient, but not, in my mind, not to the extent for the new Maidan to be forging. After all, a lot of people understand we cannot row through Maidans. The country cannot be a stable country and having a future living from Maidan until another Maidan. People are just not patient, you know. People are expecting this change to be faster, and I tend to, to succumb to this impatience myself as well.
But if the region's people can bring some of the changes the country so dearly needs, Odessa could be the birthplace of a newer, freer and stronger Ukraine. And it's something that the people want soon.